This is Duke University.
One of the big questions that is facing the country economically is how to get more jobs, right? And one of the really interesting results that we've seen is that big companies tend to destroy jobs at roughly the same rate that they create them. So if we're going to get a lot of new jobs, we need to get them from entrepreneurship. So that raises a question for us, which is, how do we get more entrepreneurship?
What Victor and I realized early on is that there was a lot of research about who entrepreneurs are, their backgrounds, whether their parents were entrepreneurs, whether they went to university or not. And there was some evidence about kind of their prior employment history, whether they worked at big companies or small companies, whether they had lots of jobs or just a few jobs. But the big gap in the literature, which surprised us, was that no one's really studying what entrepreneurs do.
One of the things that we wanted to do was figure out what are the steps that are stopping people when they start to pursue entrepreneurship. Traditionally, the way the research has been done is to look at transitions into self-employment in the census. But that doesn't let you tell apart people who wanted to start a business from people who didn't want to, and it doesn't let you see how close they got and what steps stopped them.
For us, when we actually talked to our friends and our family and our colleagues who were doing entrepreneurship, the war stories that they told us had a lot more to do with the process of entrepreneurship, rather than a lot of things we've been reading in the academic research or the popular press. So that's really what motivated us to go deep on how entrepreneurs actually go about starting companies.
We put together this nationally representative survey asking people around the country, have you considered starting a business? And what steps have you taken towards starting that business? And one of the things that's really fascinating about this is that it can actually tell us what are the barriers, what are the things that are really stopping people in their pursuit of starting a new business.
As it started, we started to ask people a very basic question. Victor and I are very practical in our approach. We said, have you considered starting a business in the last 5 years? We wanted to talk about considering, not just starting. A lot of research on entrepreneurship focuses on people who are already entrepreneurs. And there's some really good reasons to talk to people who are already entrepreneurs. But actually, if you want to understand the phenomenon of entrepreneurship, you really want to know about the people who didn't make it or didn't decide to go into entrepreneurship. And that's one of the cool features of our survey. Entrepreneurship and small business in America is very different than what you might read in the pages of Fast Company magazine. The typical small business is really small. The typical small business fails. And the typical small business isn't in a glamorous industry like tech or working on a big problem like artificial intelligence. But the typical small business, if you aggregate them together, does account for a large share of jobs in the economy. And so Victor and I really wanted not to just study entrepreneurs, the high growth ones that you read about in the pages of the Wall Street Journal, but also sort of regular small businesses to get more of a cross section of what was actually going on in the economy.
There are a couple things that we tend to think are really important for entrepreneurship. So one of those is regulation. One of those is taxes. So we started looking into whether or not those seem to have major effects. And one of the things that really surprised us is that there were very early steps where people were falling off. Things like they wouldn't search the internet to see if there was already a business doing the same thing. And that seems to suggest that a big factor that's stopping entrepreneurship is just execution. It could be that people don't have time after a long day of work, or that time management is really a problem. Of the people who said that they wanted to start a business and were limited by finance, only about 7% of them had actually ever talked to a lawyer or talked to a funding agency and tried to get financing. So we think that there's this perception that there are barriers there that might not actually be there.
Entrepreneurship is a lot like our research, which is it's very unstructured. You don't know what step comes next. You don't know what step comes first. And a lot of our jobs are actually moving in that direction, especially knowledge workers. Well, entrepreneurs are in the extreme version of that situation. No one gives you a playbook and tells you from step 1 to 10 what to do. And predictably, we find that people don't make it very far. A large percentage of our entrepreneurs never actually talk about their business idea to someone they don't already know. Now think about that. A best practice would be trying to take a business idea you're considering and talk to people beyond your friends and family. Your friends and family might give you a good opinion, but they might not want to hurt your feelings. It's really important to talk to someone who doesn't know you, who doesn't have that social relationship with you, or someone who's an expert in the field who doesn't owe you a positive answer to get the real take. But very few people actually do that when they're considering a business idea, and that's really where people get stalled. And so what was surprising to us was how quickly people give up, how many steps they actually take, which is very little, and frankly, how early on in the process we think a lot of the frictions in entrepreneurship might be occurring.
One of the things that we were really excited to look at was to compare different regions that seem to be very different. We all have these notions that the Silicon Valley, Route 128, the Silicon Prairie in Austin, that these are areas where they have dramatically different entrepreneurship. And we wanted to know what's different about the entrepreneurship. Is it that people are more ambitious? Is it that they take more steps? Is it that the social networks locally give them access to information about how to start a business? And one thing that we found that was really remarkable was there's relatively little difference in the aspirations of entrepreneurship between areas like Detroit and Madison, Wisconsin, and St. Louis and Kansas City that have pretty similar demographics, but remarkably different entrepreneurial outcomes. In terms of recommendations, this is something that's really important for the curriculum of entrepreneurship here at Duke and at business schools more broadly. And it seems to suggest to us that what we need to do is put together a more structured process and help people understand what are the next steps so that they're not lost in the ambiguity of what to do next, but that they have a good rubric of what they should be doing one step at a time, and that'll allow them to commit to moving forward without taking overly many risks.
For practice, I think that a lot of the things we're seeing around mentorship focus on giving people specific advice about how to hire an intellectual property lawyer or how to do growth hacking using your website. People might need more basic advice about how to manage their time and how to meet critical milestones, or if you're working with another co-founder, how often you should schedule meetings. There's some real basic stuff that people probably need help with if they're going to move their project past that first step. So for us, we see implications for academics, of course, but also for policymakers and hopefully for practice as well.
A lot of the policy interventions that have been considered so far have been things related to taxes and regulation. And a lot of those are very downstream. They're things that an entrepreneur won't face until they've gone pretty far into the process. And what Ronnie and my survey seems to suggest is that we need to concentrate more on upstream and very early stages of the entrepreneurial process to try to improve entrepreneurial outcomes.